At the dawn of the next day, Rayo returned to the guild, ready to take on more tasks. His routine began with dispatching goblins, but this time, he decided to bring Fryn along. Once they were out of view, Rayo summoned Fryn from his shadow, and the two of them made quick work of the goblins. The guild receptionist found it strange how quickly Rayo completed his tasks, but since there was no rule against adventurers having companions, she didn't pry. As Rayo collected his earnings from another goblin task, he thought to himself, I could do this all day. The guild had plenty of tasks available, even for other ranking adventurers, but Rayo decided to leave some for the others. He didn't want to monopolize the work, especially when there were so many new adventurers trying to make a name for themselves. While waiting for evening to fall, Rayo spent some time exploring the town, sightseeing and familiarizing himself with the changes. But deep down, he was searching for Zarin. He wanted to at least see how his friend was doing, as the last time they had met, Zarin hadn't been in the best condition. It had been years since they last saw each other, and Rayo wondered if he would even recognize his childhood friend. He scanned the streets, the markets, and even the training grounds, but there was no sign of Zarin. As evening fell, Rayo returned to the guild. A few tasks had been taken, but many still remained. Before he could pick one, the receptionist, Lori, called him over. Rayo, she said, her tone apologetic, we need to suspend your guild card temporarily. Rayo raised an eyebrow. Why? Lori explained that the guild master, Azel, had returned shortly after Rayo left earlier in the day. After hearing about the incident with the testing orb, Azel felt that Rayo hadn't been properly evaluated. He's not furious, Lori assured him, before adding, he just wants you to be tested properly. Since you've already completed some tasks, we won't take your rank away. Just come back tomorrow. Rayo nodded, understanding the situation. He left the guild, his mind already turning to the next day's challenge. The following morning, Rayo returned to the guild. Lori greeted him and led him to the training grounds, where Azel was waiting. The guild master was a slightly buff man with a commanding presence, his eyes sharp and calculating. He introduced himself with a firm handshake. I'm Azel, the guild master here. Rayo replied simply. Azel crossed his arms, his gaze narrowing. I heard you shattered my testing orb. Since you've already paid for it, I'll let that slide. But I also heard you call yourself a sword mage. As a former Royal Knight commander, I can't allow such a mockery of the swordsman class. Show me your skills, and I'll reconsider your title. Rayo agreed and stepped onto the training ground, drawing his sword. The two men faced each other, the air thick with tension. When Azel gave the signal, Rayo lunged forward, his movements swift and precise. Azel parried the strike with ease, but Rayo's wild, unpredictable fighting style kept him on his toes. The guild master was slightly impressed with what he was seeing. This boy fights like a savage, he thought, but there's a calculated precision to his movements. The duel continued, Azel's refined technique clashing with Rayo's unorthodox style. Frustrated, Azel knocked Rayo back and unleashed a flurry of strikes, each one faster and more powerful than the last. But Rayo held his ground, his calm demeanor only fueling Azel's irritation. Finally, Azel stepped back, his aura flaring as the ground beneath his feet cracked. Enough! He barked. Show me what a sword mage is capable of. Prove to me why you deserve that title. Rayo nodded, his magic aura flaring in response. Gusts of wind swirled around him as his sword began to emit a cold, icy mist. Above him, multiple fireballs formed, ready to rain down on Azel. The guild master's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face before he masked it. You passed, he said abruptly, his tone firm but calm. No need to destroy the place. This is just a test, after all. Rayo lowered his sword, the fireballs dissipating into the air. He couldn't help but wonder if Azul had backed down out of fear, but he didn't press the issue. "You can have your rank back," Azul said before turning and walking away, leaving a stunned Lori due to what she had just witnessed. With his rank restored, Rayo continued taking on tasks, his reputation growing with each completed mission. Within a week, he had risen from F rank to E rank, then D rank, earning enough to afford a modest place to stay. All the while, other adventurers whispered about his duel with Azul, some believing the guild master had gone easy on him. Rayo paid them no mind, focused on his goals. One day, as Rayo was scanning the task board, he started to think it was maybe time for him to move on to the next town. Lost in thought, a group of knights entered the guild. Their armor gleamed, and their presence commanded respect. Rio's attention was drawn to one knight in particular. His voice sounded familiar, older but unmistakable. The knight asked Lori if Azul was present, and Rayo froze. Zarin, he thought. Rayo stared at the knight, studying his face. It was him. It was Zarin. Rayo waited until the knights left before approaching Lori. "Who was that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Lori explained that those were the Royal Knights, with their commander Zarin. Rayo repeated the name as if asking a question, and Lori nodded. "Yeah, Zarin was Azul's apprentice and is now the commander of the Royal Knights." She recounted how Zarin had risen through the ranks, his determination catching Azul's attention during a monster attack on the town. "When the monster came, out of all the fighters we had, Zarin stood out the most. We had to wait until the capital sent backup, but Zarin fought relentlessly. Even when backup arrived, he continued fighting until all the monsters were defeated. Despite being such a young boy, he saved many lives. Azul took him in and trained him relentlessly," she said. "Now, Zarin is one of the most respected knights in the kingdom." Rayo listened quietly, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. He was glad Zarin had found a good life, but he couldn't help feeling a bit of regret. "He's thriving," Rayo thought. "Maybe it's better if I don't disrupt his life." After thanking Lori for the information, Rayo walked away, his mind made up. It was time for him to move on. He decided to journey to another major town he had heard about, one where he could continue to grow and explore. As he packed his belongings and prepared to leave, he glanced at Frin, who was wagging his tail happily. "Ready for a new adventure?" Rayo asked. Frin barked in response, his icy blue flames flickering with excitement. Together, they set off, leaving the town and Zarin behind. As Rayo traveled, nearing the next town, he noticed a short, chubby man struggling to free his wagon from a patch of thick mud on the side of the road. The man was red-faced and sweating, clearly frustrated by the situation. Rayo, not wanting to ignore someone in need, approached and offered his help. "Need a hand?" Rayo asked, already rolling up his sleeves. The man looked up, relief washing over his face. "Oh, thank the heavens. Yes, please. This blasted mud won't let go of my wheels." Rayo nodded and got to work, using his strength to push the wagon while the man urged his horse to pull. After a minute of effort, the wagon finally broke free from the mud, rolling onto firmer ground. The man wiped his brow and let out a hearty laugh. "You've got the strength of an ox, my boy. Thank you," he said, patting Rayo on the shoulder. "I'm Almond, by the way." "And you are?" "Rayo," he replied simply, brushing the mud off his hands. "Glad I could help." Almond, recognizing Rayo's kindness, then continued, "Rayo, you say? The name sounds familiar. Are you an adventurer?" Rayo nodded. "I am. Just passing through on my way to Laprig town." "Well, what a coincidence." "That's exactly where I'm headed," Almond said, gesturing to his wagon. "Climb aboard, and I'll give you a ride. It's the least I can do to repay your kindness." Rayo accepted the offer, and the two set off toward Laprig town. Along the way, Almond chatted amiably about the town, its guild, and the recent formation of a dungeon on the outskirts. Rayo listened intently, interested in the mention of the dungeon. When they arrived in Laprig town, Rayo and Almond parted ways, with the older man thanking him once again for his help. Rayo, now with some coin to his name, decided to rent a room at a local inn for the night. The next morning, he made his way to the town's adventurer guild, curious to see what tasks were available. The guild hall was bustling with activity, adventurers of all ranks milling about and discussing their latest exploits. Rayo approached the task board, scanning the posted missions. His eyes landed on one that immediately caught his attention: clear the newly formed dungeon on the outskirts of town. Estimated depth, 20 levels. Reward, substantial. Rayo's interest was undeniable. A dungeon clear was exactly the kind of challenge he was looking for. He approached the receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, and inquired about the task. "I'd like to take on the dungeon mission," Rayo said. The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, but dungeon missions require a party of at least 3 adventurers, and one member must be C rank or higher." "Do you have a party?" Rayo frowned. He hadn't considered the party requirement. Fryn was a capable companion, but he still needed one more member. As he pondered his options, a voice piped up from behind him. "I'll join your party." Rayo turned to see a young woman with slightly long, blonde hair and a bow slung over her shoulder. She had a confident air about her, though her expression was slightly guarded. "What?" she said, raising an eyebrow at his surprised look. "Don't you need members?" Rayo quickly recovered and nodded. "Sure, thank you. I'm Rayo." "Rena," she replied with a still expression. Just then, a mocking voice called out from across the room. "Hey, new guy. Be careful, archers aren't good in tight spaces like dungeons." A few adventurers laughed, but Rena was unfazed. "Well, there you go," she said to Rayo. "I'm an archer. If you still want to team up, it's going to be hard finding a third member." Rayo shook his head. "I'm not bothered by your class. We'll make it work." Rena looked surprised but pleased. No one had ever been so accepting of her role in a party before. Rayo, meanwhile, turned back to the receptionist. "What about summoned beasts? Can they count as party members?" he asked. The receptionist hesitated. "I'm not sure. Let me check with the guild master." As she disappeared into the back, Rena gave Rayo a curious look. "So, you're a tamer?" "No," Rayo replied. "I'm a sword mage." Rena blinked. "A sword mage? What's that?" "Basically, I'm good with a sword and can use magic," Rayo explained. "Interesting," Rena said, her curiosity piqued. Just then, the receptionist returned, accompanied by none other than Almond, the man Rayo had helped the previous day. Almond's eyes lit up when he saw Rayo. "Ah, it's you again," Almond said, grinning. "Thanks once more for your help yesterday. Now, what's this about a summoned beast?" Rayo explained the situation, and Almond stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Usually, we don't allow beasts to count as party members, even for tamers." But, he trailed off, noticing Rayo gesturing to correct him. "I'm not a tamer," Rayo said. "I'm a sword mage." Almond raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing. "You're an interesting one, I'll give you that." When he realized Rayo was serious, he asked to see Rayo's rank card. After examining it, Almond's expression turned thoughtful. "Well, it says here your AD rank, and your title as a sword mage was approved by Guild Master Azel himself. That's impressive. But your rank is still too low for a dungeon mission." Rena stepped forward. "I'm C rank," she said, showing her own rank card. Almond confirmed her rank and nodded. "All right, this could work. But I'll need to see this third member of yours." Rayo called Fryn out from his shadow, and the Fenrir materialized beside him. Almond's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the legendary beast. For a moment, he was speechless. Fenrir. Almond finally managed to say, his voice tinged with awe. You've got a Fenrir. The guild hall fell silent as everyone turned to stare at Fryn. Rena and the receptionist were equally stunned, their eyes wide with disbelief. Reo, meanwhile, sighed inwardly. He had expected this kind of reaction. To avoid causing further commotion, Almond ushered Reo into his office for a private discussion. There, Reo explained how he had cleared a dungeon by himself years ago and gained Fryn as a companion. Almond was clearly impressed but also cautious. Given your experience and your unique companion, I'll approve your party for the dungeon mission, Almond said. I'll also update your rank card to reflect that you've cleared a dungeon before. However, I can't raise your rank retroactively, it's been too long since that achievement. Reo accepted the terms without complaint. When they returned to the guild hall, Almond announced his decision, and Reo turned to Rena with a smile. We're good to go, he said. Ready to clear a dungeon. Rena was impressed, though she didn't want to show her excitement too much. Let's do it, she then said.